We are the plant cell technology leaders in the entire plant kingdom.
Theoretically, nothing's supposed to grow, but look, everything is green, everything is flourishing.
I don't want to sound too dramatic, but this technology can solve a lot of the global hunger problems.
That's exactly the idea.
What you have here is examples of cancer cells that are being killed by natural plant substances.
Yes, exactly. The desert has a lot to offer.
The Zionist dream still exists and lives in our hearts.
% of the land of Israel is what you see just behind us. It's a desolate land, a desert. The Bible tells us that God took the people of Israel for 40 years in the desert. The biggest prophets found God in the desert. Moses, Elijah, Jeremiah, Yeshua himself, before his ministry, spent 40 days in the desert. The first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, understood that if we want to see millions of Jews coming back to the land, the desert has to do exactly what Isaiah the prophet says, that one day this desert will bloom. Let us watch the miracle of the desert here in Israel.
The desert, and specifically the Negev desert, have always played this key role in the story of the Jewish people in this land. And rightly so. Even today, the Negev makes up more than 2/3 of the landmass of this country. Now think about this for a second. Every substantial story in the story of our people happens in the desert. Both the people and the modern-day state of Israel have to be transformed and hardened in the desert to be able to make it into this land. You might think that dealing with the challenges of the desert is exclusive to places that look like this, but it isn't. In many places in the world, the problems of water and soil and heat are an issue that people need to contend with. And today, we're going to see some of those very solutions, those very developments in action.
This chunk of land has the potential of keeping us in the front line of innovation.
More than 2.3 billion people are already living in dry land. Israel is the only country where the desert is becoming smaller.
We need to be inspired by the challenges to make the most out of the natural resources that we have here. The building of the nation came from the desert. The Negev was a test for our survival and still is now.
We're heading down to the Negev desert, south of Be'er Sheva, to a place called Sde Boker. And we're about to meet a historian named Paula Cavallo, who specializes in a very unique individual. David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, and some might say the father of the modern state of Israel. Paula, good to see you. Finally to meet in person.
Likewise.
So we're now in the desert,
Right.
in the Negev, right outside of your house and your research institute. Give us an overview of what this area is.
The place is called the Negev Desert, okay? It's a desert, as you can see around you, geographically speaking. We are now at the center of Israel. So when you go all the way from the south, which is Eilat, to the top, the Upper Galilee, pretty much in the middle is where we are now. This is how big the Negev is.
People imagine Israel to be what they know, the Galilee, the coastal areas. They're sort of the last stronghold of green or almost anything else east and everything south. You are immediately back in the desert.
And then the question is, so what do you do with it? Only 10% of the country's population lives here, but a significant percentage of the food comes from here. There's a lot of agriculture going on here. Cutting-edge agriculture. The whole idea of making the desert bloom is not a metaphor, it's not a dream. It's a reality. All of this starts from the basic fact that the land of Israel is small. We don't have the luxury of not using the Negev desert, but it also connects very strongly with the ethos of the birth of the nation.
The Negev desert has been a deep part of the Jewish narrative since the fathers of our faith, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, dwelt in this land. When founding the modern state of Israel, David Ben-Gurion was a driving force to encourage the miracle of settling the Negev. He even lived here for the final decade of his life. Paula took me to visit his desert home.
May 1953, Ben-Gurion is the prime minister, and he is invited to launch a new road. So the delegation goes past, and suddenly Ben-Gurion says,
Stop.
"Stop the car." He opens the door and he walks. And
Into this place.
Yeah, but this place doesn't really exist. It's a desert.
Yeah.
He's walking towards who knows where. And you can imagine, I mean, we're Israelis, right? So we know what it means when a prime minister just walks out of a security zone. Oh my God, I mean, everybody's really tensed. Now, before they realize what's happening, he's standing and talking with some people. Now, who are those people? A bunch of 20-something years old planting trees in the middle of this
Very dry desert.
Very dry soil. Someone says, "Good morning, Boker Tov." They raise their heads outside in the middle of the desert. It's an icon, a very powerful situation. He says, "I never felt envy towards any individual or group, but when I saw you, that's how I felt." This is, in practice, self-sufficiency. For him, this is the essence of Zionism. If we will not be able to teach ourselves to deal with the desert, to make the best out of it, then we have a problem.
To this day, Israel has not fully realized the Negev's potential. While much of our agriculture, as well as military facilities and other key institutions are based here, the Negev remains largely unsettled. Our population centers like Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa are north of here in a more temperate climate. But Ben-Gurion was known for seeing things differently, and this guided his vision.
I invite you to enter my favorite place in Israel, David Ben-Gurion's desert home. We call it in Hebrew the tzrif, the hut.
I'm stricken by how modest everything is.
The room around here, right, is full of books, and the books reflect the scope of his interest, okay? So imagine, right? Sits on the chair, and he says, give me a piece of paper. He opens the Bible, and he writes down quotes from Isaiah, and all the quotes from Isaiah have to do with the desert. So we have Yesusu midbar, bloom and rejoice, and there's because I gave in the desert water and rivers, phrases like that, and they're here. As a constant reminder, the Bible says that we can make it here, so we'll make it here. The connection of the people in the Bible is something that he took very seriously. Look over there. So he sits here. What does he see every day? It's Moses. Who brought the people of Israel from Egypt all the way through the desert to right here to land? It's Moses. He wants Moses to be in front of him every day. Isaiah, the desert, and Moses as like this constant echoing a reminder of why we're here, how can we make it?
Ben-Gurion was truly a visionary. He didn't just want to see the desert bloom, he wanted to see it become a hub for the next steps of our country's development.
Ben-Gurion, in one of his famous writings about the desert, he says that mankind existence depends on water and power. The Negev can supply that because we have natural power, remember the sun, and we have two seas, the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. You have endless water, just desalinate them. It's as if he's talking in the 21st century. When we talk about renewable energies and how we need to use energy, but without exhausting the resources, all of this is encapsulated in the ideas that Ben-Gurion writes about in the mid-50s.
Welcome back to the studio. It's amazing to see what God did in this desert of Israel. Mati.
100%. I mean, it's incredible to see how Ben-Gurion, the father of the modern state of Israel, combined both this vision, but also the practicality to be able to really execute something that is unique and historic in this country. And he looks at the desert, and at Sde Boker particularly, and he says, this is where the Jewish people are going to be tested.
It reminds me of the story of the 12 spies. You can choose to be like the 10 and see the giants and see the problems, or you can be like the 2, Joshua and Caleb, and says, God will provide. Those giants are nothing in our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's our story here. Just do something to make it work or fail completely. So at every turn of the way, people here had the strength to really find those creative solutions.
So let's watch together what happens next.
More than 70 years later, David Ben-Gurion's prediction has come full circle. The harshness of the Negev and the complete lack of resources have been the perfect study ground for innovators and developers in Israel. Just a few miles away is one of the leading desert research institutes in the entire world. And this institute carries the perfect name, the Desert Institute of the Ben Gurion University in the Negev. Hi, Noam.
Hi.
Good to see you. And thank you for taking the time.
Welcome to our little home. We have 4 major needs that we are dealing with: water security, food security, solar energy, and ecosystem dynamics. I think that most people will agree that these 4 issues are really crucial for the future of humanity.
Can you explain, so if we're thinking just from a terminology basis, what does a desert mean?
So deserts are basically dry lands. In dry lands, there are some needs to begin with. And if there is not enough water, there is not enough food. Now, on top of that, we have the process that's called desertification. Desertification is a process where land that was fertile and good for food production is not fertile anymore, and we cannot use it for agriculture. The United Nations defined desertification as the largest environmental problem in the 21st century. Israel is the only country where the desert is becoming smaller, not bigger. A lot of it is because of our contribution, our technology, our new methods that are being developed here in our institutes. David Ben-Gurion, he called it Oxford in the Negev. And what we're doing here practically is fulfilling his dream. Bringing together scientists, decision makers, companies, farmers, all together sitting around the same table, make sure that we find the right solutions, we develop the right technologies for the desert. And if we do that, the late Ben-Gurion will be proud of us. Within the Desert Research Institute, we have 3 research institutes and a school. We have the Water Institute. The second institute is the Agriculture and Biotechnology of Dryland. The third institute is divided to 2 departments, the Department of Renewable Energy and Environmental Physics. The know-how that we are developing here is being spread to many places around the world, all 5 continents. And a lot of decision makers in many countries did their masters or their PhDs here in the heart of the Israeli Negev Desert at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research.
So where are we heading now?
We are heading to the fish lab.
It's incredible to see the range of research and development happening in this place. Noam took me to see one of the projects the Desert Institute is working on, and he chose a truly remarkable one.
Excuse the question, though, but fish and the desert, in my mind, don't really automatically connect.
You will be surprised.
It turns out, this arid desert offers the perfect conditions for raising fish. And the fish studies the Desert Institute conducts actually have the potential to feed millions of people worldwide.
This is Professor Dina Zilberg and Professor Amit Gross from the Water Institute.
So help us understand. You said you're growing things in the water, in the desert.
Yeah, actually it's quite unique. We found out that the waste of the fish contain so much energy that if you take it and apply it in our special reactor, then we can take this fuel and turn on the generator to produce energy. And that can run our systems.
Help us understand, where are you getting water in the desert?
We have here a big water reservoir, underground water reservoir. They are not good enough for drinking, but we can utilize it to grow fish. It is actually adding nutrients to it. And then from the fish, it is continued to grow vegetables.
So we've been talking about the theory. Now let's see the practice inside the lab.
We are running about 190 paramundi fishes. Any wastewater from here is pumped back into the reactor and treated and pumped back for the same water to be used for the rearing of the fish.
So if this research works, what's going to be the outcome?
The outcome is that we can develop like systems that can produce sustainable fish. That is basically why I'm here in this country. That I know will bring out fantastic technology for production of fish to meet the global demand for aquaculture products.
So you want to take this technology back to your country?
To my country, and then also replicate it to the world.
What we're doing here is way more than science. I mean, we are doing science, but our science is really helping a lot of people and especially enable people to live in dry lands. This is huge for the future of humanity.
Just as Ben-Gurion envisioned, the desert has become a lab of innovation not only for the people of Israel, but for the entire world.
I think Ben-Gurion would be really happy.
When people come here, they know that they come to a place where there are a lot of really outstanding science and engineering in the heart of the Negev.
This is the closest you could get to Genesis. When you look at this, it feels like we have to start everything from the beginning, and it's empty, and it's arid, and it's challenging, but it's full of potential. Just like the world was full of potential when God said, "Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, vayhi or."
Shalom. Today we have the great honor to have with us Professor Shamovitz. He's the president of Ben-Gurion University. Professor Shamovitz, Daniel.
Danny, please.
Danny, great honor having you with us.
Thanks, Morley.
Can you tell us about yourself first?
I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania. I had a very strong Jewish identity. And so after high school, I took a gap year and spent a year in Israel. And I was a half a year on a kibbutz in the southern Negev, kibbutz Keturah.
Ah, wow.
And I can almost remember the day I was driving a tractor in the alfalfa fields of kibbutz Keturah. And have you ever driven a tractor?
Yes.
You have a lot of time to think when you're on the tractor. And I had this literally a eureka moment with the sun coming down and coming up over the hills of Edom there over the Jordan. If we could figure out why alfalfa grows back and wheat doesn't, we could feed the world. And at that moment, I stopped being pre-med and went to be pre-ag. Always in the back of my mind was this idea, how are we going to feed the world?
Tell us a bit about the Ben-Gurion University.
Ben-Gurion University of the Negev was founded in the vision of David Ben-Gurion. In 1963, Ben-Gurion said, I envision that scholars and researchers will sit in the gates of the Negev, sort of like Abraham.
Yeah.
Uncover its secrets of the desert, how to make energy from the sun, water from the air, and food from the sands, to take advantage of resources that are, until now, going to waste. Yeah, over 50 years ago. You know, who was thinking of these things?
A real visionary.
A real visionary. And at the time, we even had to fly professors because there was almost no roads. But over the past 52 years, we've now grown into Israel's third largest university, 20,000 students, 3 campuses. What seemed like a dream over 50 years ago is this reality where the world is now coming to us to learn how we not only survive in the desert, but how we thrive in the desert.
Do you think that the university and Israel in large can be a help to our neighbors?
Not only can we be a help for our neighbors, we are a help for our neighbors. Next week, I'm going to Dubai, where I was invited to give a lecture on food security from the desert. Almost all of the water from the Sea of Galilee, where does it go to today? It goes to Jordan. We export it to Jordan.
Unbelievable.
Why can we export the water to Jordan? Because we now generate all the water we need through desalination. Where was water first desalinated in Israel? At Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. We often use the term a light unto the nations. Israel is a light unto the nations. When you see what we've done over the past 50 years at Ben-Gurion University, it is a miracle. But we have an obligation that this is not our richness. This is not our wealth. We don't own technology. We don't own knowledge. We're custodians.
Beautiful.
And that's what we're doing.
Professor Shamovitz, what a great honor. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
Thank you. And to you, our friends, remember, God is faithful. And once again, thank you and shalom from Jerusalem.
Today we have a truly special story for you. 6 astronauts conducting science experiments, spacewalks, mental and physical training right here on the surface of Mars. I mean the Negev Desert. This is the Ramon crater, a unique geological phenomenon and the biggest of its kind in the world. Its extreme conditions resemble the surface of Mars, making it the perfect place for an analog Mars habitat simulation.
This is an effort to shape the future of space in Israel.
I met up with Itai Levy, the director of the project, to get an insider's look of this remarkable project.
We have the resources We have the environment, we have the desert and the Ramon crater, which is
as close as you get to being in space on Earth, yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
But this is an opportunity, and this is us seeking that opportunity and looking to make it into the real life of Israel space industry and research.
5, 4.
Today marked the end of a successful simulation. After 3 weeks of being locked away from civilization, the 6 astronauts who were training in the simulation greeted the world for the first time.
It's like a dress rehearsal.
That's exactly right. This mission is a partnership, is a joint venture by the Israeli Space Agency and the Austrian Space Forum. We invited researchers from all over the world. These are over 2,000 countries.
This is a Mars-like area which is unparalleled on this planet. So our concept is that we here implement a complex Mars analog station that is able to mimic all the limitations and opportunities an actual station would have on Mars as well. It includes spacesuit simulators, rovers, helicopters, basically a full range of tool sets we need to explore Mars and maybe look there for traces of life.
Now it was time to take a tour of the facility and see just how it all works.
This is the type of facility we might see one day on Mars.
So this is the science section where some of the experiments have been conducted. All the telemetry from the spacesuits is being transmitted via satellite to the Mission Support Center in Austria. We're going to take you to the social section, so to say. The analog astronauts have to cook, clean, sleep, talk, and so on. Because after all, they're humans, they have a social life as well.
So each one of these cubicles, this was sort of like the same on a submarine, I guess.
Absolutely.
This is the most private you'll get. This mission lasted only a month, but future researchers would have to stay years.
So working out the details suddenly becomes very important.
Mars is an unforgiving place, and so every mistake we make here on Earth, we are grateful for, because for every mistake, we can change and evolve our technology and not repeat the mistake on Mars when it's too late.
We always talk in Israel about the fact that the desert tests your fortitude as an individual. I don't think I or anyone ever imagined that it would test people's ability to get to Mars.
40 years in the desert to reach the land of Israel, but it's a
3
few
weeks,
longer.
2 weeks, it's a stepping stone.
After seeing the habitat, I wanted to hear firsthand about the experience of living there.
So Annika, you just came out of 3 weeks in this tiny habitat behind us, and you're still smiling and happy.
It definitely was a positive experience, yes. Work with so many different people from all nationalities for a common goal, and it's a really, really nice experience. Of course, there's different points of view, there's maybe little conflicts, but being able to overcome those and to work together, yeah, happy with the experience and the results.
The Israeli desert is alive and blooming with innovation as it brings together people from all over the world with the hope that they can help mankind take the next giant leap.
If you watch the Earth from space, you don't see any borders. So when we go to Mars, we don't necessarily go as Austrians or Israeli, we go as humans, as a society. It's all about international collaboration. We all remember the beautiful story of Moses sending the 12 spies to the land. We all know the beautiful picture of those 2 spies carrying the grapevine, but that was not the case when God started bringing the Jewish people, when He started calling them back to the land. The land was barren, the land was empty. The biggest problem was how would they provide for themselves? There was a need, there was a necessity, and this necessity brought Israel in the field of agriculture to levels which none of our neighbors got to. Israel is leading in the agriculture worldwide. Agriculture turned into a science here in the land of Israel. I really believe that the God of Israel that brought the people of Israel back to the land gave the people of Israel a supernatural wisdom in the field of agriculture. Let us watch together what God is doing in this field, in the land of the Bible, in the land of Israel.
It was real people with real ambition who transformed this land from the desert into an agricultural dreamland, like the one we're standing in right now. And when you think about the miracle of the transformation, the depth of that transformation, you realize what a unique characteristic those people truly had.
We're looking at a flourishing, green, amazing desert, which it's kind of an oxymoron.
Instead of struggling, you're sitting in a place that is a mass exporter of goods to the entire world. It's layer on layer on layer on layer of innovation, research, discovery, necessity pushing into just really creative ideas.
Out of every challenge grows an opportunity here in the desert.
You're walking through the desert, and you keep looking at all these plants, and you're saying to yourself, there must be something more.
I've met two kinds of Israelis. The ones that a challenge for them is a closed door and that's it. And the kind of Israelis that said that the closed door is only an excuse to get into this room through the window.
I took a journey deep into southern Israel, to the Arava. The Arava is a long desert valley along the border with Jordan that stretches from the Dead Sea to the Gulf of Eilat. And it's incredibly hot and dry here. Surprisingly, it's also a mainstay of Israel's agriculture industry.
What a place, Nadav.
No place like home.
Look at this beautiful view.
This is what we see every morning from our window.
And it's very much not what you would expect from the middle of the desert, quote unquote. More agriculture than many areas of the country have.
Probably greener than a lot of the places you've been at. And this is, the land of the endless summer.
Right now we're in Chatzeva, a cooperative agricultural village in southern Israel, or a moshav, as it's known in Hebrew. It was founded in 1965 as part of Israel's desert agriculture revolution. With 150 independent farms operating today, Chatzeva remains a key player in making sure desert farming continues to thrive. Nadav, who oversees the entire moshav, gave me the grand tour.
So let's go back to your origin story. You're not of this place.
I'm not originally
of this place. Yes. How did you end up in the middle of the desert?
The Zionist dream still, exists and lives in our hearts.
What is that in your mind?
So look, we're half a mile from the Jordanian border, and to the west, also nothing there. We've decided we want to grow our kids here and basically make the desert bloom, bring a different kind of Israel here on a human level. And right now, I'm the CEO of the moshav. So I wasn't even born here, not raised here, but now as they say, I run this joint. When you get into your car and you drive south of Be'er Sheva into the desert, you see a lot of yellow. This is desert. Why would I want to live here? And then you take a left turn into the moshav and you see a lot of green. And every time we have people that haven't spent much time here, they say, it's amazing. I didn't realize it's so much green here. The Israeli market is very small. How many people in Israel eat? 8 million people? It's nothing. We grow for about 80 million people because people are, persistent, they're trying, and it's working. The topsoil here is something that almost nothing grows on. And we can see date farms and grapefruits, peppers and tomatoes and all kind of, the good stuff. It's a ton of
things that don't belong in this place, basically.
It's a ton of things that don't belong in this place.
Okay.
And also the knowledge that people have gained through the years, we don't keep it to ourselves. Basically, we're teaching the world how to feed itself. Now you've entered Moshav Chatzeva. See the date trees and the little turnabout that says, in the Negev, the people of Israel will be tested by David Ben Gurion. This is how we live our life.
So far, it seems like you've done well with this test.
So far, so good. So far, so good. These are called net houses. They're not greenhouses. This is a greenhouse. You would grow tomatoes in it, cucumbers. And to our left, it's tunnels, eggplants, watermelons. You can see we also grow corn here. Israeli agriculture is very high-tech. We moved from throwing some water on the ground and see whatever grows to drip irrigation, hanging the plants, making more out of the three major things that you need for growing something. You need soil, you need water, and you need sun. So sunlights we have year-round. Water, we don't have good quality water here, but we drill for about a mile deep, and we take very salty water, but we learn how to use them in the fields. Even the soil that we step on, most of the crops are not grown on this soil. So we bring soil from other parts of Israel. We'll put it on the topsoil that already exists, and then we grow on it. About 100 years ago, when Jews from mostly European countries, cold countries, when they moved to Israel, they wanted to tear off this image of the Jew that was always looked down and always were looked down at
And overnight, they shed the shell of the diaspora of 2,000 years of being detached from the land and the country.
You saw a new Jewish face. You saw the strong farmer. You don't see the black clothes. You don't see the long beard. You see the strong Jew that is moving to Israel and making the desert bloom.
It's sort of like the ultimate test of character. You can't be soft and make it in the desert. Even if you look into the biblical narrative, you can't ever achieve something of virtue or quality without going through a desert phase, without the hardship and the struggle.
Let's show you some of our greenhouses. We talk so much. Here you go. Welcome. We have the cherry tomatoes, which are very famous for Israel. And if you look at the way that we grow them, this is a stem, right? This is a tomato stem. So it should just grow from the ground straight up, right? But what we do here, we take it around, back and forth, back and forth. Why? When you have a single stem that goes up, you can have 20 tomatoes, 40 tomatoes. Here you can take out of one stem, one plant, about 400 tomatoes. Why do we even need to grow things on the ground? We have strawberries. There's a little bit of dirt in it, and they use whatever water they need. And because they're in an angle, whatever leftover water flows down to a water tank, and you reuse the water. Here you have mint. Now, why grow mint on the ground? Why not grow it on a post? Let it go up. Easier to pick, less insects, less bugs. If I have a greenhouse, okay, so I'll probably plant several plants and let it grow. No, there's a better way to do it. Try to hang it, try to push it, try to pull it.
We're standing in this place that's a hub of thinking creatively about how to maximize everything.
Exactly. So, tell me how it is. Just dig into it.
Oh, this is juicy.
Great, huh?
Very sweet.
I can live off of that. So right now, we're going to a date farm that a friend of mine is working on. It's right over there. So now we're gonna meet Tomer.
Hey, Tomer.
Hi, nice to meet you.
How's it going?
Okay.
Coming up?
Yeah, we're coming up.
So, Tomer, you're the real deal. When we think about the people out in the desert making agriculture happen, you're the face of that.
I appreciate it. I want to teach my kids also to know what is hard work and why we're here in Israel. I need to do it myself before I teach other people to do it. So I take the challenge on myself right now.
So I imagine, Tomer, most of the work happens at height, and we're here mainly because we want to go up.
So let's go up.
Let's go up.
Let's go up. So here you can actually see the view. On this side is the moshav itself, Chatzeva, more bay plantation, greenhouses.
When you get up at height, it's even more shocking how much there's a contrast. You're in the middle of the most deserty desert you could imagine.
This is exactly the future of agriculture in Israel. If Tomer and her likes will choose to come here to learn about it, to work in this environment for a year or two, I can see a bright future because this is going to be a very high-tech field of expertise. We think here in the Arava, this is the next field where Israel is going to lead the world, and Tomer is a perfect example for it.
The early pioneers who came back to the land in the late 19th century endured incredible hardship trying to cultivate the land again. And over time, with the development of technology, things got easier. Today, things are much different. Israel became an exporter of technology and knowledge to the farthest corners of the earth. In fact, in deserts around the world today, plants and fields are growing with technology coming out of the land of Zion. So we've seen how Israeli innovation has helped with the desert problem, but now we're going to meet something slightly different. We're on our way up to Netanya, which is in the northern coastal area of Israel, to meet with CropX, which is this new startup company who've developed a new sensor package which is supposed to help farmers around the world have a deeper understanding of exactly what's happening in their field in real time. Tomer, we're about to see a demonstration of the system. Do you want to introduce your all-star team before we get started?
Yeah, sure thing. Avi recently did Aliyah from New Jersey. He's an agronomist and data science on the agronomy team. And Guy is the VP of agronomy. He knows everything there is to know. So he's
the guy with the plan, huh?
Exactly, the brain. Mai grew up in Los Angeles. She's part of the customer service team.
So this is it. I mean, I was expecting, some heavy machinery. It looks like you guys brought the same equipment I have at home.
Just one power tool, and that's all you need. All I do is I find where I want to put it in the field, and then I dig a hole. Just make sure. And then we just screw it into the ground as such. It's that simple.
I can now see the data from the soil I can see that it was recently fertilized. I can see the moisture content of the soil, and I can see soil temperature. So with this data that I get immediately, the farmer can make much better decisions.
CropX represents Israeli AGRITECH at its finest. It's a smart farming device that gives farmers real-time insights into the conditions of their soil, and it's being used around the world.
CropX is part of the AgTech revolution. So we have sensors in this device that measure the moisture of the soil, electroconductivity, which is salinity, the saltiness of the soil. We connect that to nitrogen and fertility, and temperature. The part that you see out of the ground transmits to the cloud.
What have farmers been doing so far?
In many places, they do this.
You're kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
Still today in the first world?
Yeah. We create much more value, between 10 and 20% yield increasement, which is huge. With every sensor that is installed across the globe, our system continues to learn and to get smarter. And the power of the system grows because the system
the system is getting more clever.
The system, yeah, exactly. When I was done with my previous startup, I really looked for something different that kind of had a do-good part to it. Since then, I haven't looked back.
Yet again, the challenges Israelis are facing have led to solutions that impact people everywhere in the world. This is what happens when God blesses a nation, promises to prosper them, and then empowers them to carry out his promises.
If you can make it in the Arava, you can probably make it anywhere in Israel. If you want to be a pioneer in any field of expertise, this is the place to be.
It's a huge honor being able to expose Israel to the world through positive technology, that really helps save the globe.
From the Arava, where people are putting in the hours and developing methods to make the desert bloom, to innovative Israeli tech that is creating a global smart farming network. The future looks bright, and the sky's the limit.
With us today is Professor Chaim Rabinovich. The Bible tells us that the land of Israel is the land of milk and honey. And with him, we're going to discuss the whole issue of agriculture. Professor Rabinovich, welcome to our show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
In Israel, you're known to be the father of the cherry tomatoes.
I'm not the father. I'm a member of a team, maybe headed the team and so on and so forth. But it all started with our previous work on extending the shelf life of the tomato. Indeed, the shelf life of the tomato was extended, but the tomato could stay on the bush for a longer period of time, thus accumulate more sugars, more acids, more volatiles. So all the goodies, instead of being compacted into, let's say, 50 tons, is being compacted in 25, so it's even more tasty. Picking cherry tomatoes is laborious. A trained worker with salad tomato who does like that picks about 800 kilograms per day. A cherry tomato is 60 kilograms per day, so it's much more expensive. And we asked ourselves, when you buy grapes, do you ever dream of buying grapes individually? Never.
Never.
You think about a bunch of grapes, right? So why can't we do the same thing with cherry tomatoes?
Oh, beautiful.
So, when a fruit develops seeds, actually a lot of energy, which means lots of sugars, lots of fatty acids, proteins, and so on and so forth, go into the seed, which is the embryo of the next generation. Now, Israel was the first one to develop what we call parthenocarpic cucumbers, once they develop without seeds. That means, A, you don't need fertilizers, so you save a lot of the space. All the plants are female for this respect. B, cucumbers are much more tasty. And this was spread all over the world. In every field of agriculture that you throw a stone, you find a touch of Israeli innovative approach.
When we talk about Israel, Israel is known that is leading in agriculture. It's probably because of necessity, but in which...
Mainly because of necessity.
Yeah.
It's a combination of very high-skilled farmers, very good supporting system of experts, very good contacts. Most of Israeli farmers are university graduates. And they keep, well, there are very few of them today. There are about 12,000 growers in Israel. And it's not surprising to get a telephone call from a farmer. Look, I was a student like 20 years ago. I have a problem. Can you help me in answering the problem and so on and so forth? Very high sophisticated seed industry of fruit and vegetables that were developed in Israel and are being sold now all over the world, rather than importing things that were developed, let's say in Denmark, and I have nothing against Denmark, but it is suitable to a different climate, different soil, different everything. So by adding this together with good farming, you can get a good produce.
Professor Chaim Rabinovich, what a great insight on agriculture. Thank you very much. And for you, our friend, stay with us for another insight on Israel.
We use technology and innovation to grow crops in the desert despite the harsh conditions. But when you take those conditions and combine them with agricultural know-how and medical science, miracles can take place.
Hello, Rivki.
Shalom, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Is this your famous lab?
Yes, please enter.
Thank you.
At a young age, Dr. Rivki Ophir packed her bags and headed to Israel's Arava desert, where she got her PhD in plant biology. For decades, she has been studying the healing properties of plants native to the Arava. And what she's discovered is that their ability to heal is directly related to the desert environment in which they grow.
So we're here because you present a fascinating story. So maybe we can start sort of with the background story of how you got to here today.
Love brought me here. This was in 1973. I joined my husband, Moshele. He was the founder of the Moshav Hatzeva. From 1973 to 1982, we worked on the fields and raised 3 kids. And I always dream about going back to science. Lucky me, on 1982, I went to do my PhD in Ben-Gurion University. I asked the question why the immune system failed to eradicate cancer diseases.
It's quite relevant still.
It's quite relevant still. Being a mother, travel a lot in the desert. Around me, I saw the desert plants, and I already had the idea that there is some secret in this plant, and maybe I will be able to harness them to my research. In one of the plants, which is called Achillea fragmentosa, I found something very interesting, not just against cancer, but against brain diseases. There was one compound that I really liked, so the chemists said, bring me a lot of this material, and I will separate this compound and give you a tube with this compound. So I went to the desert, to the same place where I collect this plant, took the seeds, went to the farm, irrigate, fertilize, etc., and I have a huge amount bags with the plant, and I went to this chemist in Tel Aviv, and he said, I need to disappoint you. I can find this compound only in the desert plant. I don't find it where you irrigate.
While trying to extract this miracle compound, Dr. Rivki stumbled across the true secret of the desert.
And many people, when they imagine a plant, we want to give it the best conditions. But in reality, especially in the desert, they need some kind of stress.
The plants that grow in the desert, going through many harsh conditions, like irradiation, salt, sun, no rain.
The quality only comes out when it's hard.
Yes.
So this is the famous lab?
Yes, and in the lab we have cells. Cancer cells will grow here in the incubator.
Can I take a look?
You can look on them. In order to be expert, you need to look in the microscope.
I'm not an expert.
Yes.
So the yellow ones in your sample are the cancer cells that died from desert plant extracts.
Exactly. Yes.
That's
and
quite a good sample there.
Yes, we have many samples like this.
You say this in passing as if it's like an obvious thing, but what you have here is examples of cancer cells that are being killed by natural plant substances.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's quite a statement.
Exactly.
For you, it's like, yes, another day in the office. But for most people, that's news.
Exactly.
It's not chemo, it's not radiation.
Yes.
That is killing cancerous cells.
Exactly. So many years, I tell the people that there is something unique in the desert, and suddenly I was able to prove it.
It's just a beautiful process. Say, like, look, there must be something about these plants. There's something about the hardship, and then you proved it. It's almost impossible to miss the analogies between the personal journey and the story of reclaiming the desert. You sort of did that same process on the cellular level.
I agree with you. I really agree. Thank you for making all these conclusions.
It's your story.
We all remember the story of the 12 spies. Moses sent them into the land to see if the land is good. And we know this beautiful report. Joshua and Caleb come back and says the land is full of milk and honey. 3,000 years later, the people of Israel returning to the land, and what they see is what we see behind us. 60% of the land is desert. This necessity caused the state of Israel to invest so much resources and wisdom, and I believe it's a supernatural wisdom, to bring biotech and agriculture to a level that you don't see anywhere in the world. Let us watch together the miracle of innovation here in the land of the Bible, in the land of Israel.
From the dawn of humanity, mankind has relied on the land for its sustenance. We cultivated fields just like this barley field to feed a growing population. But as the population grew, our draw on the land grew. And today, more than ever, we need to innovate and come up with new solutions to solve tomorrow's problems. Around the world, companies and governments are racing to create these solutions. And at the forefront of that race are Israeli companies and innovators.
There is a huge innovation in Israel in the biotech industry and also in the agriculture industry. And Israel is a leader in this technology.
We're trying to look into the next step in the evolution of the food industry because we have to really consider how to optimize our use of natural resources so that we don't overconsume our planet.
Bringing the power of nature to the people through a very, very unique process that ensures optimal efficacy for the human body.
We're on our way to northern Israel to meet with Uri Lesmes, who's an associate professor at the Technion in the Faculty of Biotech and Food Sciences. Uri and his team are working on some incredible developments that affect aspects of our everyday life.
Hey, Uri. Welcome.
Thank you for having us, Professor.
Pleasure to have you. So, first of all, welcome to the Technion. Let's start off with a broad definition of science and technology. Science is understanding what's around us. And technology is about harnessing this knowledge to manipulate our environment. You have biotech, which applies biological knowledge into manipulations and technologies that we can harness for mankind benefit. Agritech can manipulate anything in the agricultural field. And food tech involves any sort of intervention to manipulate the stages of food from their initial stage all the way down to the consumers.
Food technology has always been a matter of man's survival and goes way back to the beginning of time. Bear in mind the human species is the only one that cooks their food. I asked Uri to take me through the history of how we got here to this place and lifestyle.
We harnessed fire to transform natural resources, food, meat, pulses, whatever, to something that provides us better calories, better nutrition. So our body was free not just to survive, but to do other things. And that's where you see the big leap in the human brain. Let's go back to current times. So the 21st century gave us mass production of food that is tasty, safe, affordable, and convenient. But then people became more obese, diabetes was on the rise, IBD, Crohn, colitis. And then late 1990s, early 2000s, people started to look for healthier food options. And then food and health became a big issue. The market started to demand better foods.
And then we come to the next phase, which is where you sit today.
In that sense, we're trying to look into the next step in the evolution of the food industry and the intersection between humans and their food. We need to accept the fact that from birth to death, our bodies change, our needs change. So throughout life, we need to tailor what we eat to our needs. And this is where science comes into play. For example, when you look at infant formula, there are stages. Stage 1 for newborns, stage 2 for 6-month-old babies, and for toddlers, you have stage 3, for example. But after stage 3, foods becomes one size fits all. Take whatever you want, whenever you want it. But we change. And the food industry has yet to offer tailored solutions. For example, why is the same apple giving the same person, but at different life stages, different benefits? So we're trying to take those concepts and actually make them intersect with food engineering.
Uri and his faculty are trying to achieve something that will be a complete game changer.
You created these bioreactors that are essentially stomachs, intestines that are in a lab. And it's like, so this is for an elderly person, this is for a young person, this is for male, female, et cetera. And then feed them and see how things break down in them. And then the output of that information is this group in society needs this different kind of food. Is that the right way to describe it?
Yeah, we're trying to build a toolbox of knowledge that can then be translated by industry, by manufacturers, to manipulations that they can do either in how they process the food or how they formulate food. We're trying to find all the rules of nature that then we can try to manipulate better to different individuals.
I think you raise a point that is counterintuitive to many people, in which most people think, myself included, if I need 10 grams of protein or whatever, I consume 10 grams and my body absorbs 10 grams.
If only nature was that simple, I'd be out of a job.
You would?
Yeah, it's because it's not just about the 10 grams per day, but it's also the source, because you don't consume a pure ingredient.
Yeah.
One day you can have an egg, another day you can have a piece of salmon, another day you can have something that looks like a meatball or a burger that's made from worms, that's made from crickets.
Hold on. Made from worms?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Humans are obliged to scour nature for protein sources so that we can exhaust nature's diversity to give us protein. Insects produce protein at much better yields. To get 1 kilogram of protein out of a cow, I would have to feed it with 20 kilograms of feed. So we're talking about a 1 to 20 conversion factor. For insects, it's almost 1 to 1. That's one thing. The second thing is they grow much faster. A cow takes 4 or 5 years to grow for us to enjoy a steak. Insects takes weeks. It doesn't make sense to ignore their potential as a source, but the problem is there. A lot of people in the Western world think of insects as something dirty. But if they are grown in reactors, they will be very, very clean. And if we then make them into porridge, ice cream, into yogurt, into bread, into snacks, so why not explore that avenue?
Have you explored that?
Yeah. We even produced in our lab ice cream that is fortified with worm protein. Lucky for us, it was simply tasty. And it was more nutritious than a normal ice cream. The problem is in our faces. The world is not growing, and we need to find new solutions to solve our problems. And not just follow the rules, because the rules always bring you to a certain point. And even Einstein was a very wise man, and he said, if you keep doing the same, don't expect to get different results. This is exactly the counterintuition of Israelis. We are always trying to find a different way to get to the same point or to a better point. We're trying to reinvent.
Welcome back. Mati, it's very interesting to see when we think about the land of Israel, a land of milk and honey. In the next 20 years or 30 years, there won't be enough milk and there won't be enough honey.
Yeah.
And food tech might be vital.
Well, that's what's incredible. You might be eating a substitute to the milk and a substitute to the honey that we never thought was possible before. And it's easier to obtain, and it's going to be easier on your body to digest, and it's going to be easier to scale up and feed people that don't have the right kind of food today.
Israel brings a solution not just for Israel, for the rest of the world. When you think about India, you think about the growth of population in the next 20, 30 years.
And we're seeing that. I mean, we're seeing the technologies that are developed here in small scale being sort of rolled out in other countries in a much larger scale. You could almost say we have an inverse blessing here, where the land is so harsh and the environment is so challenging that it forced us to come up with really creative ideas. And we're able to bless others with those same creative solutions.
Beautiful.
And that's really the story of this land. An incredible story of hope and blessing comes out of this place to the world.
So let's continue watching some of those solutions.
The Bible tightly ties the concept of blessing and fruitfulness of the land. If you're in Israel and you're following God's plan, the land will bear much fruit. And if you're not, well, it doesn't. Thousands of years later, after these scriptures were originally written, we're back in the same place. Just this time, it's not just the fruit of the land, it's fruit paired with technology, with innovation and knowledge. We've become a nation that exports knowledge in the biotech, in the agrotech, in the food tech industries, and spreads them around the world. We're heading towards Rehovot in central Israel to meet a super interesting company called BioHarvest Sciences. And from what we've heard, they're working on some of the most cutting-edge technology with things that have to do with food supplements. Ilan.
Hey, Mati.
Good to see you.
Welcome to BioHarvest Sciences.
Thank you.
BioHarvest Sciences, at our core, we are a biotech company that's focused on health and wellness. When God gave us the beautiful earth and he filled us with literally millions of different species of plants, there was a reason. These plants carrying essential active ingredients for the human body. And we have a proprietary platform technology that allows us to take any active ingredient from the plant, and we're able to grow that active ingredient in a cell for people to consume in order to improve their overall health and wellness.
BioHarvest's flagship product, Vinia, is a health supplement created from grape extract.
Vinia is based on the French paradox. French people, they have a very fatty diet, but they have generally very good cardiovascular health. The scientists looked at it and they realized, wow, it's from moderate consumption of red wine. That's 2 to 3 glasses of red wine every single day. They realized it was from a combination of polyphenols that live inside the actual red grape.
Breaking down the science behind a certain diet's health benefits is one thing, but BioHarvest is taking that to the next level.
So with our technology, from the skin of the red grape, we started to grow those specific polyphenols in a cell over 21 days in bioreactors. Literally, we're feeding the cells almost like you would feed in a vineyard, except we're growing them in bioreactors and we're feeding these beautiful cells. And once they reach the body mass, we do what actually happens in real life with wine. We harvest the cells, and as a result, we have a very, very active powder which is able to significantly increase blood flow in the body.
The ability to increase blood flow from a supplement alone sounds incredible. I met with Malkit Azachi, who has been leading Vinia's clinical trials, to explain to me exactly what that means.
So, first of all, we perform 4 clinical trials in high blood pressure, also in doing sports. We saw that their sugar levels reduces and they felt better. When we are talking on blood flow, we are talking on all the body, on the brain, on the legs, on eyes, everything controlled by our blood flow. It means that when you improve the blood flow, you improve your quality of life. You live better, you think more clearly, you are more awake.
In this room over here, we have our bioreactors where we're actually growing our red grape cells.
I noticed they're hidden.
They are behind closed curtains, obviously given the sensitivity of our technology. The team are actually in the final stages of a harvest. So when the cells have reached a specific body mass, literally we take the cells out of the bioreactors, we then take them through a drying process. It then is encapsulated in those little capsules that we then provide to the consumer.
And I mean, I'm looking at it, it looks like the real thing. So it's like lab-grown nature. Shalom.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Dr. Yochi Chagai is the co-founder and chief scientist at Vinia, and she is the mother of this technology.
If we compare it to the other technology that are in the market, there are two main technology to extract the active ingredients from plants, or you can synthesize it as a synthetic product. Both of them, the conformation of these components is changed. And in our process, we keep this natural structure, which is optimal for human and also for plants. Until we started to develop this technology, nobody succeeded to do it because it's very complex to grow plant cells in liquid media because it's not natural for them. And we are the first in the world. We are going to change the world. In this way, people can consume our product to prevent disease. This is the idea, to prevent disease in the world.
Ultimately, we're doing God's work in the modern world. And we're the bridge to bring the power of the plants that God created, and we're bringing it to consumers in a way that their bodies are able to dissolve and produce the right kind of positive health and wellness outcomes for the consumer.
It's impressive to see Israeli scientists and innovators taking God's gifts of nature to a whole new level of healing.
Israel is a small state. It doesn't have a lot of natural resources. Rather, we have our best resources, and that is the human mind. One person can generate creativity, that's fine. But when a lot of people stimulate each other, that's where really cool things are born.
It's a real privilege from the Almighty that I can have responsibility, making a fundamental difference to the overall health and wellness of the world.
Shalom from Jerusalem. Today we have a special honor to have with us Mr. Hanan Schneider. Hanan is the CEO of Millennium Food Tech. Shalom, Hanan. Tell us about yourself and about Food Tech.
First of all, thank you very much for having me in this amazing scene of Jerusalem. Millennium Food Tech is a publicly traded venture capital fund which invests only in food tech with alternative protein, extending shelf life, dealing with organic waste, packaging, Industry 4.0 to food and beverage companies, etc. Because food tech is going to be the science of the future.
When we talk about Israel as a leading country in food tech, do you think that has to do with the fact that we live in a tough neighborhood, that because of the neighborhood, Israel has to be more self-sufficient, depending on themselves?
I think it's more about the innovation in Israel. Israel considered to be the innovation hub of the world, and it's considered to be now the food tech hub of the world. And this is why all the world are looking at Israel to see what comes in this area of food tech from Israel.
We like stories.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a story about one company that does something which is worth hearing?
Yeah, so I think that the story of Aleph Farm is very, very interesting.
What's Aleph Farm?
Aleph Farm is a cultured meat company that is now producing a minute steak, cultured minute steak that is produced in the lab, and hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, we will see it in our supermarkets.
Wow.
Now, the tissue culture or the stem cell that scientists in the Technion tried to heal in the wounded people. So from that, they were able to transform or converge this technology to the area of food tech and to take the stem cells from the cow and produce in the lab cultured meat.
Is it going to taste the same on the barbecue?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We invest only where we can feel, touch, and taste the product. So I ate that, and it's good.
Hanan, when I think about food tech and I look on our region, I'm sure that Israel can be a solution for the whole region.
Yeah, this is a very, very good point. Tnuva, which is the biggest Israeli dairy and food company, did a deal with United Emirates company to transfer a technology that was developed in Israel to there in order to support their food security schemes.
Another way that Israel is being a blessing and a light to the nations around us. Beautiful. Hanan, thank you very much. What a great honor.
Thank you.
And to you, our friends, once again, shalom from Jerusalem.
I'm on my way to meet the CEO of a super innovative ag-tech company that's changing the future of farming.
Hey Guy, how are you doing?
See you.
Hey, great to see you.
Guy's company, Vertical Fields, is bringing farming out of the fields and into urban areas, where vertical farms created in shipping containers can be stored right outside your neighborhood supermarket.
Today there's a farmers in the rural area, and it has to take it all the way from the rural area to the place that people are living, which usually is the urban area. It goes through warehouses and shipment, transportation, climate change in between the spots. And at the end of the day, it has the costs, the environmental impacts, and of course, the level of health and the quality of the produce. And basically, the vertical farming is saying the following: let's save all this journey from the farmers all the way to the retailers or to the consumers and make it more economically, more environmental, in a way that the produce at the end of the day has higher level of vitamins, nutrition, and freshness.
The vertical farming system created by this company allows them to grow greens, herbs, and lettuce using technology that not only works in this environment, but actually creates higher and better yields than the same plants grown in traditional farming methods.
So you're saying that regardless of what's going on outside, you're able to, day in, day out, grow consistently quality fresh plants wherever you are in the world.
That's exactly the idea. Growing food is no longer an issue of climate, an issue of weather, an issue of distance. It can be done everywhere.
Because it's optimized.
Exactly. Because the best day is inside the containers, wherever you want it and whenever you want it.
Guy, can we go into the belly of the beast?
With pleasure.
So, Guy, we see in here all your technology coming together. Plants, the water, the lighting, it's a lot going on in here.
Right. Irrigation is being done precisely with less water. The produce are being harvested in a very easy-to-use way, like you take it out. We're using every square feet in a multiply of 5, 6, 7 times more. So you feel the moistures.
Outside it was cold and dry. We come in here, it's moist and warm in here.
Exactly.
Can we take apart some of these pieces and see how it looks inside?
Yeah, let's look at this lettuce. The lettuce becomes bigger in 14, 15 days from now. The consumer gets it in a very fresh and living status. And only when the consumer wants to eat it, he harvests it and takes the soil out, and then he gets the best, freshest produce. At the end of the day, God invented plants to grow inside the soil, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, and to add the ecosystem to grow it properly.
With vertical fields in the picture, the future of farming looks bright, fresh, and healthy for suppliers, consumers, and our precious earth.
To have the food available, accessible, and simple. Simplicity is the basic ideas of this farm. A person that is not skilled can go and operate that and have food wherever you want it and whenever you want it.
You're solving all these problems at once, and the solution is incredible. And you have fresh food again and again and again, as long as it's up and running.
Exactly, that's exactly the idea.
Hey, I'm Mati Shoshani, and thank you for watching the TBN Israel YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you greater understanding of Israel and her people. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear from you, so be sure to share what you've learned and ask your questions in comments below. And invite your friends to join the conversation.